De Villiers, and today we'll be presenting Integrating Contemporary Commercial Music in Education, Enhancing Engagement, and Expanding Musical Horizons. So Professor De Villiers will be starting off with a bit of background and introduction and the literature study. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Robert. So, thanks. So, we've had some experience with contemporary commercial music. I'm sure some of you already have as well. Based on the show of hands, I mean, if I've keep you to ask who's actually has engaged with it, and what we have also discovered in our research is that it's still a very fledgling state in at South African universities. And in a previous study, actually with Robert's masters, he looked at how to introduce it in a university setting without actually having a contemporary commercial degree. Because in overseas, in some countries like in Australia, at Griffith University, for instance, they have a fully fledged commercial contemporary commercial music degree. In South Africa, trying to introduce it, one has to introduce it just within the very small, narrow framework with the subject or the main instrument, and then working within those constraints of a very conservatoire environment and introducing it like that. And we were very successful with Robert's masters in contemporary music because we were able to actually have his whole masters be contemporary music recitals and then being examined by obviously the academics in South Africa were examiners, and then the treatise part was actually explaining the whole journey to get to that point. Um, right, and so but today we are going to look at how the different types of contemporary commercial music and also the pedagogies that one can use in that. And so I'll start with the literature. There's so many words that are being used to explain CCM, including words like pop music, light music, rock, or non-classical music. So we're trying to see whether we can not just merge it together and say what actually it is. And Levetri, in 2002, she actually coined the word CCM for all genres that were not classical. And so it is inclusive of funk, R&B, rock, heavy metal, soul, pop, country, rap, experimental, reggae, indie, folk, and jazz. And these diverse styles are evident in all the graded exam lists. If you look at the ABRSM list, Trinity College lists, and each of those styles, as you know, would have their own performance culture as well. I mean, R&B. I mean, it even goes with the way of dressing, being rock music, how one sings, and so it's almost like a lifestyle at some points. But all those graded exam books that teachers often turn to use, they're from the UK, and being a Commonwealth country, we also we follow those exams as well. But we fail to include anything South African. So a teacher at a high school is going to say, okay, I'm going to entering the children for rock and pop and the grade 6 exam, but then there's this lack of actually incorporating anything South African. And if one looks, so what we want to add to this list, but not limited to, because you know this with CCM, there's a new genre all the time. So we would like to add to that whole list that Lavetri gives is to add other examples of CCM like Afro House, Kwaito, hip hop,
Yeah.
Afrikaans rock, Afrikaans pop, Cape Afrikaans hip hop, and Motswaka. So all let's just be inclusive, include everything. And if more comes along, that's also included. Right. So now jazz and its subgenres are often we all know about them, Maskanda, Marabi, and they were also considered to be popular music at some point in time. But jazz differs from all of the other examples of CCM because it has got that improvisatory element. But the improvisation is limited. It's also within a framework. It's within a framework of your chord progressions. So it's just not always such free improvisation. So So, and in any case, jazz has been institutionalized now for such a long time that whenever you speak about contemporary music, you have to say jazz and contemporary music, although they're different styles. Because actually, you need to be really true to, from a musicological point of view, jazz is actually a subgenre of CCM. With CCM, everything that was popular at some point in time, including jazz, was a form of pop music a long time ago. Just to be quite clear about that. Right, now we're talking about transforming music education and expanding musical horizons. And different countries do things differently. For this purpose of the paper, we actually looked at what is happening in Western Australia. We was trying to compare apples with apples. In Western Australia, that they've taken a different approach to what we've done in South Africa with our curriculum at schools. In South Africa, if anybody's done music in FET or and has read about our curriculum, you'll know we do the Western art music stream, the jazz stream, Indigenous African music stream. And you can do different things. You can play the piano, doing Western art music piano, and then still do the history component of Indigenous African music. And the theory could be jazz. So you can have all, you can don't just follow one stream, it can be a mixture of the streams. But what happens, in my opinion, you don't, there's, but with all those streams, it's almost like a timeline. There's a line drawn in the sand. We end at this date. Everything becomes historical. And as we go forward in time, I mean, when I started studying in the 1900s, I mean, then, well, 1989, 1990, that was 1900s. Then, then the Romantic era was like just 100 and something years ago. Now, how long is it now? You see? And we do classical, we stop with Bartok. You know, that's where the line ends sometimes for us. We don't worry about new composers. And but what they did in Western Australia, they did something totally different. They, instead of having, because of the population, I'll call them First Nation population, people live in Western Australia. Sometimes the elders and the cultural leaders don't want to include their music in the curriculum because the music has got sacred connotations, got cultural connotations. And also, even though we are now in a democratic society, women are playing guitars. And why can I not play the flute in the, when it was traditionally a shepherd's instrument? We have moved away from some of those things within our open society, but in some cultures, it's still a very strict division of what is male and what is female. Roles of even playing of instruments and rituals are and music that is associated with rituals. So how do you accommodate that? And how do you then say, are we always going to represent some cultures like as in a museumified approach? That's in the past. So what they did in Western Australia to be more inclusive was to actually say, let us do it differently. We'll have Western art music as a stream, jazz as a stream, and then contemporary music as a stream. Because then the contemporary music would include elements of traditional music, which is then commercialized. And then it also gives everybody feels that they are part of what is happening in contemporary society. I mean, we have this. We also have examples of popular music like that in South Africa, which borrows from either whether you're looking at melodies, scales, instruments incorporated in the music. But we don't follow it like that. But they're very their streaming in the school system is very much more rigid than we have it. So you follow your Western art music stream, and you do history according to that, your performance according to that, and your music theory according to that. Or if we do contemporary, it will be the same. And they take that approach across all the other art forms as well, in visual arts as well. I don't know who did visual arts at school, perhaps in matric. Thank you. So in visual arts, we actually follow that approach much more close than in music, because you include everything. Willie Bester is there along with Van Gogh. So it's but with music is not like that. Yeah. Okay. So then students have then universities like Southern Cross University and Griffith University in Australia then offer these degrees in contemporary commercial music. And researchers like Neuenfeld, writing in 2006, and Remus in 1999, they make the inclusion of indigenous popular music in the school curricula. And their research is of value to us in South Africa because if we are looking for ways to include local contemporary music into the school curriculum, then what they've experienced in Australia it can be, is of great relevance to us because they look at issues, what the lyrics represent. They're addressing socio-economic, socio-political, social, cultural issues. And which kind of popular music in South Africa addresses those things? You can help me along here. Which popular music in South Africa addresses issues of the socio-cultural, socio-political? Rap, yeah, quite. So you can see it makes it contemporary. It's saying this is the music that you are performing. I'm not going to change you to come in and study with me. We are going to take what you have and then move along with that. Okay, so but now in South Africa, I actually found this very interesting. I will cut my literature study a bit short so that Robert can have speak about the get into real meat of the CCM because I'm not a CCM performer at all. I'm just yeah, working curriculum. So African curriculum actually I found it very interesting to say in that FET document for music as a subject. It says there, and I'll read from the document. It says that learners can choose works from the standard repertoire of Western art music, jazz, African music, rock and pop, and other musical styles for the chosen instrument or voice. So it actually says that in the curriculum. So schools aren't bound by just doing, but obviously in a school, we're looking at who is teaching the curriculum. I mean, and then even at university, I mean, often the innovations have to happen um, with contract staff because you're really sitting now with people who are going in a certain space and they'll just continue like that. And then you need your innovations often happens, even at Nelson Mandela University, the innovations happen with the contract staff because now you can introduce something, and see how it will grow. And so this makes it possible, based on this statement from the curriculum, to actually have um, include CCM and its diverse genres. And as I said previously, the teachers do use those graded exams. And in Berge, we have the SSNT has into the mix competition, which is where where the children come with that they perform contemporary commercial music, and it's mainly drums and voice. But then the teachers will follow the rock school's curriculum. You'll find like a whole lot of children will sing Let It Go, because now that happens to be on a certain grade level. Um, but at the university, and Robert will speak about that in his own experiences as a lecturer at the university, one has more autonomy because then the students are coming to you and saying, I'd like to sing this specific song, and they'll do the arrangements as well. So then it's just a bit, because university lecturers do have a bit more autonomy and the students have more agency because the students don't come to us as empty vessels. They're already practicing their music, doing their beats and everything, and they're DJing on this outside of the university. They come to us for a qualified piece of paper, but they are already practitioners, you know. Okay, so then I'm just looking but in South Africa, like I said, within our university system, it is still very fledgling. And also when you start looking at research in South Africa on Kwaito, looking at research on rap, hip hop, is that everybody's writing about it, mainly about from a social sciences point of view. It is about identity formation. It's about language. It's about socio-political issues. It's about the fact that that the lyrics are about social issues, and it's not about actually saying, let us include Kwaito, let's include rap, let's include hip hop in the academy. Nobody's writing about that. Uh, um, I mean, I did a Google Scholar search. I mean, we went through hundreds of articles, and nobody's saying include it. We're not saying throw out everything else. We're just saying, what if we can include it? Okay, so that is just something. So, but then I just also, I think Robert, you will have to elaborate more on this. Is that the vocal pedagogy for CCM? And yesterday we heard a lot about well-being of the voice, and also about with the panel discussion at the end of the day, speaking about the teaching methodologies that everybody had experienced in South Africa, the panel members, but CCM's pedagogy differs completely from the classical pedagogy. And there's a time when people said, okay, if you train in classical voice, you train in everything. But I think I'll hand it over to Robert right now.
I think we have access to so many resources with regards to CCM. And if anyone in a tertiary institute or even in a high school or in education, if they teach CCM, they usually have a Western classical qualification. And that's why I'm very grateful for organizations like NATS that link us up to people like Genia Levatry and people from America and from England that have started this whole contemporary commercial music battle, if I can call it, to showcase these different pedagogical approaches and methods. So just to look at some of the things that are available, if you're thinking of teaching methodologies and vocal pedagogy, various technical styles, you find that some of them have similarities. Sometimes you find there's a bit of an argument with certain things where they say, is a falsetto the same as a head voice or is it not? At the end of the day, if we look at these different methodologies like the Estel method, somatic voice works, complete vocal technique, they incorporate all the little things, the little nuances in different styles that we don't necessarily find in Western classical art music. If we look at, for instance, looking at rock music, where you have a different approach. It's more like a beltier sound. You have to compete or link up with an electric guitar, and you have like a growly type of approach to certain things, or almost like a yell sound when you approach rock music. And we don't have that in the things that we've been taught as Western classical musicians or learners in that sense. And just by speaking also to a few of the presenters that are interested in CCM, they don't necessarily have the background with CCM or actually doing courses, or they start with the Western classical, and then because the approaches of teaching CCM ranges differently. If I'm just thinking, if we sing a Western classical art piece, and where would the laryngeal position be? Just in general, if you want to put up your hands, where usually if you had to sing like a aria or something, we usually, what would you say? Lower. And if you do CCM, it is in a neutral position. We don't necessarily have to physically manipulate the whole vocal box or the structure to be able to sing. If we sing happy birthday, did you warm up before the time? Or if I said, I'm going to tell a joke, did you warm up? Because I don't want you to damage your voice. Things like that. So it's more of a speech level singing where we use natural sounds also when we do exercises or warm-ups, in the sense, if we think things we'd use in choirs also. If we laugh, do we laugh uphill or downhill? Those type of things. And then we think of like when we do warm-ups, you go, ah. But it's easier to go from up to down. I'm crying. All those type of sounds. So we do natural sounds when we incorporate it into our training. And you'll find people who have experienced different genres, they also use that in their methods. Or like, I didn't warm up. What can I do? Those type of exercises. And you start from a high note to a low note. And we just kind of do it automatically because it feels normal. It feels natural. So in that sense, I feel that you have a different approach with CCM because it is more of a speech level thing. Even when teaching students and you find they would say, sir, but I can't reach that note. I'm thinking, what, if you saw a mouse or a rat, you'll go, ah, and it'll be there. Did you warm up for that note? No. But you can go, ah, and you can be able to sing there. So as long, I really feel that any sound that you can make with your mouth, you'll be able to get a note there. So if you can reach a high C, whether it is a head resonance or a chest, or you'll be able to sustain a note there. So those type of things, that is definitely my approach to having a natural approach, or speaking it sometimes, because now you can speak that note, but you can't sing it. some people tend to go into that singing mode. They'll say, "Good morning, I'm Robert Gillmer, and I'm going to sing," and it's like a singing mode. And the thing is, we shouldn't have that approach. Still be professional. When your performance starts off behind the curtain, walking up to stage, but that you have that natural approach when you go towards that. So, if we're looking at teaching repertoire, just the different approaches of teaching CCM. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. If we're looking at, say, for instance, we spoke about rock music. So it uses a powerful and gritty vocal tone, often characterized by rasp or distortion. Right? You can think already instruments that go with a rock band, distortion guitars. So we're kind of mimicking the same thing. Belting and strong projection to cut through the instrumentation and create intensity. Incorporation of vocal growls and screams to add raw emotion and energy. Right? Then if we look at, let's say for instance, R&B, smooth and soulful vocal delivery with a focus on emotional expression, skillful use of vocal runs, slides, riffs for melodic embellishments, subtle vocal inflections and nuances to convey intimacy and sensuality. So I was just earlier, before we did the presentation, speaking to one of our colleagues, saying that it's either like a singer's blessing and curse, because if you're looking at different instruments, if you do piano, for instance, and you go according to a specific syllabi, almost up to a doctorate level, you're still allowed to use your sheet music. But as a singer, you don't do extracts as a beginner, as an initial person. You have to sing a full song, and you do it without lyrics, because it's the known thing to do, that you sing, because if you have to focus on lyrics or notes or anything, it means you're cutting off your audience. I mean, if you play piano, you're not going to play a seductive piece and I'm not going to argue against that. But you understand, it feels weird if as an instrumentalist you have to portray it in that sense, because you're looking at a different thing. So for a singer, it is a different approach because it is real. And sometimes we even look at adjudication of singers, where there was an example of Kelly Clarkson. Now, she's a professional singer. And she was the first person doing American Idols, and she was the last person to finish off the Idol sessions. They weren't going to continue with it. And you would think, as teachers, we tell our students, never apologize. Make a mistake, just carry on, those type of things. But sometimes we have to sacrifice the beautiful voice for the real voice. She did a song called Piece by Piece, where it is a story about her father and comparing it to her husband, saying that the father left her, and you will never be like my husband who looks after my daughter. And she was emotional. And at that moment, she only had a person accompanying with piano, and she said, "I'm sorry." And she carried on, and everyone in that building sat with tears in their eyes because they felt the emotion. No one thought like, "Oh, she's unprofessional because she stopped halfway through." No, it's taboo. This is not professional. So sometimes we need to acknowledge that feeling is part, conveying emotion. We are humans. We are trying to convey a message. What is music? What is speech? It is trying to convey a message, send it over through to our audience and getting feedback from that energy. That's why it is so important to look at the specific nuances in these genres to know that it's authentic. Just quickly, if I'm thinking of like country music also, where we think of where it originated from. If it's adding a southern accent, by instance, would that make it more authentic? If you're looking at other styles, look at this one. We've got options over here. We've got folk music, musical theatre, classic contemporary crossover, electro, and punk. Let's maybe look at the classical contemporary crossover. Artists like Josh Groban. Some people might say, no, but Josh Groban's not a classical singer. He's singing with a microphone. I see the eyes rolling, but you understand, where have we gone with this? At the end of the day, it's music. We're making music. So blending classical vocal techniques with contemporary styles, creating fusion of genres, incorporation of classical vocal training, including proper breath support, resonance, placement, Integration of contemporary vocal elements like pop style phrasing and ornamentation. I mean, the first time, maybe it's a little bit before some of the people's time, where we listened to You Raise Me Up for the first time. You know, it touches you. It is a language that we can understand. And in this instance also, most of the languages that we teach in CCM would be something that we're familiar with, either English or maybe Afrikaans or Xhosa or Zulu. You know, you'll be able to incorporate these things. So the process of having to translate music speeds up certain sections. So you don't have to go through specific German pieces. Another thing also, speaking about the different languages, it would be ideal if our institutions had a department, a music department, if we specifically went for classical music, and we can teach French, Italian, and German, as even if it's conversational, just to give that upper hand where you understand, where if someone sang Karom yo ben, would they be able to know if it's a happy or sad song? You know, it's sometimes then you ask students because you're interested. Maybe you don't even understand the language as an adjudicator, but it's like, what did you sing about? Oh, no, so I don't know. And then the teacher looks like, I told you that. Go read your script. So things like that happen. Also, one of my favorite genres, if I'm thinking of punk, it's raw and aggressive vocal delivery characterized by powerful and intense singing, fast-paced and energetic vocal phrasing to match the fast tempo of punk music. Vocal distortion, grit to convey rebelliousness, attitude, and confrontational sound. Right, we also have a few others. I tried to incorporate as many as possible because, I mean, it's an ever-growing genre or mix of genres. If you're looking at Christian contemporary music, I mean, this is not brand new. Years ago, we had Amy Grant that had the song Friends Are Friends Forever. It goes, Friends are friends forever, if the Lord's the Lord of them. It was in the top 40 charts. And that was, earlier, it was like 1960s that they had these type of music. So Christian contemporary music is part of contemporary music. It is a genre. Then we think of something maybe a little bit closer. Hillsong released a song called Oceans. I don't know if you're aware of this, if you know the song. Some people might not come from a Christian background, but they know the song because it's been on the charts. If we think of how it is, you know, how we teach or you know, what we're looking at it, is clear and articulate vocal delivery to effectively convey a message of faith and hope, balancing between introspective and uplifting vocal styles depending on the lyrical content, incorporation of vocal harmonies, layered vocals to create rich and textured sound. Right, so there's a specific sound or emotion that goes with this genre. Then let's look at something like Kwaito. Use of repetition, catchy hooks, and party-centric lyrics. Emphasis on vocal clarity, projection, and rhythmic precision. Incorporation of vocal improvisation and vocal interaction with the audience. Fusion of urban contemporary sound with traditional African vocal styles. At the moment, I have a student that is doing his diploma in music education. And my approach to students is to actually to listen to what they sound like before they started with training, or just how I received them in the first place. I think if I had to be insulted in a way, if I had to take all my students to a competition and someone said, oh, number 1, number 5, number 7, number 8, it must be Robert's students because they all sound the same. Okay? So we need to be careful not to imprint so much of ourselves into that student that you become a bully in that way, where we need to find the natural sound and see where it fits in what box, or you know, even if it's a mixture, and see how we can enhance those things. And the specific student might be pitch weak, but a brilliant rapper. Now, I think if we had to, by show of hands, if I had to give you a week to prepare a rap song, and I give you all the lyrics and I give you all the tools, who would actually be keen to do that? Amazing. So those are the things that we tend to run away from. But if you're looking at the teaching styles, you know, what do we look at when we teach voice, whether it's singing or rapping? It's actually the same. We're looking at articulation, breath support, placement. So those things are, you know, why should that not be part of a a singing exam. And if when we do take students like that on to a competition and they have like a vocal piece that they sing and they have a rap part, it's like, whoo, this is amazing. It's like it's something new, but it's been around for so long. All right. So looking at expanding musical horizons. So in essence, having all these resources to our that's it's literally in our grasp, and speaking to other people who have experience in CCM, listening to songs on the radio, utilizing these things. If we think of what CCM brings to the party, it enhances engagement. CCM enhances student engagement and creates meaningful connections and relevance in music education, fostering active participation and ownership in musical learning. Thinking also of a specific student, we started off with our first year before COVID, then we did most of our training online. And she just had a knack for South African gospel music. So the way that we aligned her program was to look at things in the jazz genre, something like God Bless the Child, or something that might be a freedom song, A Change is Going to Come. We looked at songs like that and stuff that she was able to sing in church, that she could relate to and her community could relate to. And eventually we did a full-on exam with her doing contemporary commercial music as a gospel singer. And it felt like a church service. It was really amazing where she could have these vocal nuances, almost have like a Aretha Franklin tone, all the little beltier sounds, and it felt authentic. We just needed a pastor to start with the opening prayer, and it felt really authentic. So in that sense, it enhances engagement, looking at giving the students the opportunity to study something that they want to study. I think if I had to speak out of my own experience, when I started at university, I started at a late age, started at 30, didn't have any formal training in, in school. So at 30, I started with my music diploma in classical, Western classical music. And you think you're walking into this institute and you're going to do music, so it's something that you're going to hear on the radio, or maybe something that you're familiar with. And then you go into this new thing, because now all of a sudden I wasn't exposed to operatic singing, so coming from a farm school in that sense. But so I thought, okay, let me try this. Let's see how it goes. I had an amazing lecturer, Mr. Lionel van Sale, and some of you already know his name, and did that for 3 years. Thought, let's try something else. I did in my degree. I did jazz, focused on that. I enjoyed it very much. And just having that sense of being able to produce sounds or songs that you're familiar with. So often, when students get into the universities, they think, okay, I'm going to sing something that the people will know. And it doesn't always happen. If you think of what the general public know from, is a sense of classical music, people don't know the repertoire. And often you also have to teach the students. You have to go through books and books and books of repertoire, and they have to write it, they have to listen, to go through these things. Using CCM as a medium, it bridges so many gaps where, the children are literally, they're used to all these things. Okay. So with regards to what I did in my master's, my first recital, because of the university not being familiar with CCM, we had to showcase a little pathway to start off, to say, okay, where did music start off? So my approach was to take folk music and showcase the pathway of going to the classical route. Maybe, say, for instance, like Scarborough Fair or Sally Gardens. It might be a folk song, but it had a different approach with a classical interpretation. And then showcasing musical theater pieces that also incorporate into it. And then eventually going to do something like Danny Boy. I actually performed that we had a choir that sang it at a classical approach. And then later doing a song from One Republic, I Lived, that is also folk, But I mean, where do we draw the line? At the end of the day, it's music. But that's such one of the adjudicators also asked, to say that, like, but why is he singing with a microphone? No, so those some things we need to educate as we go along. Where if you sing contemporary music and you're in an auditorium that has 2,000 people, will you be able to sing over a drum kit or electric guitar that is amplified? It's impossible. So we need to get with the times also in that sense. Also with the amplification, you're able to whisper, and you can still project in that sense, or the message can still be relayed. If you think of the diverse cultures that we can approach, all of a sudden, it's open. You know, if someone wanted to sing Pata Pata for the exam, yes, we can start off with that. You know, maybe encourage them to take something that they didn't sing from the age of 2. Or maybe encourage them to write their own music. We tend to say in the contemporary world, you're only an artist when you start writing your own music because we start copying other people. So then you start to sound like Shania Twain, or you start to sound like whoever. But if you start writing your own music, you have your own taste, your own range. I'm thinking of Bruno Mars. Who writes his music? He writes it because he knows his range, he knows his style. And, you know, people might think that it's okay, he has an 80s vibe or something, but that's working for him. But his voice is amazing, and he can pull off quite a few different things with that. So CCM celebrates diverse musical cultures and identities by addressing cultural representation, inclusivity. CCM also promotes a broader understanding and appreciation of different genres and styles. Yeah, I did mention quite a few things over there. So if we're looking at expands musical horizons, CCM expands musical horizons by breaking down genre boundaries and encouraging musical exploration. CCM also enables the development of critical listening skills and musical discernment. If I'm thinking the way that I teach high school students I do the jazz, South African jazz and international jazz for the matric syllabi in the IEB. The thing is, we need to make sure that the students can relate to different music. If they hear this for the first time, they'll say, okay, it's bebop. Why? Fast-paced, anxious mood, extensive harmonic structures, virtuosic musicians, looking at all those different things where if I had to put a song that wasn't a set piece, the children won't say to me, like, but sir, you didn't play the song to us. We don't know the song. But you'll be able to say, if the song goes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, and you can hear more than 15 instruments. You know, it's big band, swing, you know, that type of thing. So we can identify these music styles. If we're thinking of our approach when we learn repertoire from a Western classical approach, you can hear the nuances or the stylistic effects that a specific pianist or even a composer, there's certain things, certain mechanisms they use. They say, oh, this is definitely, it's a Mozart piece. But if I had to play a song from Christina Aguilera, how are you going to know it's Christina Aguilera? You can hear her voice. Hey! You know, those type of thing. Or if it's Whitney Houston, those type of things. Or if you hear someone singing 2 tones at the same time with a breathy tone, you're going to know it's Layla Hathaway. I can't do that, unfortunately. But you know that we listen to music and we can identify certain aspects to it. And we can definitely say, well, this is an aspect of jazz, R&B, pop, because we recognize those things. And now we often think as educators, when we play these music, like, oh, why don't you understand this? Can't you hear this? But we've never taught them that way. So we need to teach kids to listen. So if we're looking at inclusion, the inclusion of CCM opens up avenues for creativity in the diverse field of music production and enhances innovation of music in composition. Like I said earlier on, you know, we should encourage students to write, because then they start experimenting and it's fun. They take ownership of this genre, so they feel that they can contribute something. If we ask in an exam paper, we say, you know, what musical contribution did this artist give to situation in South Africa? we would say, oh, okay, it was Meadowlands. Meadowlands was a musical contribution by Strike Villiers, or, those type of things, so we know exactly where it comes from, what is the musical contribution. And at the end of the day, we're living in a global village. I mean, all of a sudden, I can just go on Facebook and I'll find Diana Allen. And I can send her a message and say, hey, I saw you at the NATS conference. I want to share an idea. If we're thinking of people who are still around and we're teaching our students with regards to like Abdullah Ibrahim, if you're doing a history class or you're speaking about, obviously you don't want all 20 of your students to go and email him, but that we have access to these people, and especially with contemporary music, the people are still alive. We can ask them questions. What did you feel when you wrote this? Invite them for a master class. Please come and teach the students. What did you feel? What is the socio-political climate? How did you come up with these chordal structures? Maybe it was just a fluke. The player's like, oh, this sounds nice. I was also speaking to someone and saying that often when we have musicians who weren't schooled, but they're brilliant. And then you think like, oh, what are you playing there? What chords are you using? Maybe we weren't able to see that in the university education, but because of their practical experience, who's there to judge to say that that person doesn't have more or less experience that you have in your instrument? Maybe you didn't practice your 3 hours a day to practice your piano, your vocal singing, but that person practices every day of his life. So where that physical experience, maybe taking even a longer route to work on something, but they know the instrument from beginning to end. All right, so just in conclusion, when teaching CCM, one needs to open to move outside of one's comfort zone and explore styles that our learners are engaging with. I think in a sense, as a musician or a singer, we should always be a student. Because, I mean, you can learn from people in your classroom. You can learn from people who are either professors or in the industry. You should never close ideas. That's why I enjoy like a student-based curriculum where you would get suggestions. At the end of the day, then you have more than one set of ears that are listening to songs. Sir, have you heard this new song by Ed Sheeran? No, let's listen to it quickly. It's like, oh, okay, this would actually suit your voice nicely. Let's see if we can add this to our exam program. Because we need our learners and students where they are, we meet them where they are, moving from the known to the unknown. I think also just that our approach in that sense where as a dictator in the class, that we actually become more relevant. In that sense, I mean, at the end of the day, as a vocal teacher, you're almost their psychologist, their doctor, their friend, and the worst critic and their best friend. So people share those things, and we want to have that open relationship with our students where we can speak about things and ask them questions and say, okay, well, let's try this song. And if you do criticize them, that they don't break down in that moment where you know that this is our safe space, this is where we work on things. When you're on the stage, it's always, and then we speak about it afterwards. Did you realize that you went a little bit flat on that note? And they won't freak out because you've been in this open relationship and that type of thing with regards to teaching. So voice teachers and lecturers who are interested in introducing CCM should be a lifelong learner. I really believe that. And enroll and attend online courses so that they can incorporate good practice in their teaching. Vocal teachers and lecturers embarking on introducing CCM in South African education institutions be part of a larger community of practitioners such as NATS. So just in closing, you can see I'm a Walt Disney fan. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. I think it's the first thing, even if you are scared of starting, or incorporating CCM, the first thing is when you start, then it becomes easy. Breaking down things, you've done analysis of music, that's the analyzing form of music, it counts for everything. We're working with music, it's not something new. So breaking it down, teaching it in little instances. I also enjoy the fact that when you teach, you don't necessarily have to follow the score, where you can, my approach would be to teach phrases instead of note bashing, where you immediately connect the emotion or the feel of the song where it's going. Sometimes you look at contemporary music, and it's really difficult if you have to base it on just the score, because now there's dotted rests, and like, oh, how do I sing that? But when you listen to it immediately, oh, okay, it's a swing feel, it's not a 12/8, that type of thing. So trying to incorporate in that way. So I'm just really excited that people are open to CCM, and that we're seeing this happening more often in institutions, and people are asking questions. So I'm going to give a chance if you wanted to ask questions with regards to this. So I just want to say thank you from our side, Robert Gillmer and Professor ALETHEA de Villiers. We also have our email addresses if you have any questions. And the floor is yours. Thanks.
Robert, ALETHEA, thank you so much for that enlightening presentation. We've got time for about 2 or 3 questions. So, Jason, can I see, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Wonderful.
Hi, I'm going to speak while I set this up so long. This is for Robert. Actually, I'm just going to speak, Robert. I found your presentation very interesting, and I enjoyed the layout you gave for the different genres and kind of the approach you would take. I have an interesting perspective on this because I come from I have extensive, vocal training, but I'm also a music producer. So I work a lot with recordings as well. Now, one thing that I wanted to just add on to what you said is there's also a large, massive difference between preparing your students for the recording setting and for the performance setting, and that's something people need to take into their approach or to add, because when you're in a recording setting, the microphone gives you a lot of freedom. You can express yourself in a much you have more range for expression, but in the perspective of performances, often you need to sustain these techniques for a longer period of time. And it's something that I've struggled with myself. Being in a recording studio is very different to performing in a live environment. So I think that's also something that I can imagine you adding to or anyone who ends up using this, to adding to the training for those students as well.
That's I think it's brilliant, because the thing is immediately just putting the difference in with just technology in general. Working with in-ears on a stage kind of gives you that studio vibe where it could be quite intimidating. Not everyone's used to hearing their voice in their ears, and now all of a sudden now it feels like maybe the mic might be too hot. Now it's like, oh, I'm pulling back, or I'm reserving myself. I'm not belting as much because it feels like I'm so loud in my ears. So those type of things, working in a studio environment, it's really good to practice with those things and actually incorporate into things. I'm very open-minded, even just in exams, but like with regards to CCM. I actually don't have a problem with adding things like auto-tune to a performance, not to fix mistakes, but to enhance the performance. If you think of Cher, in 1998, she brought out a song, Believe, and everyone's like, what is this? And obviously it had a special effect, but you can still hear that she performed it live. And then with regards to the technology that was with it, they had that auto-tune effect where it was a completely like a misuse of auto-tune to give that electronic effect. And the way that we see the performance stage for exam, I think it's going to change drastically in the next few years, maybe months, because we are working, instead of working with MIDI tracks, we are working with multi-tracks. And even if you look at international artists, for instance, like Panic at the Disco, Brendan Urie, brilliant vocalist, but he'll perform with a 4-piece band, but it sounds so full because they use tracks. The drummer has his in-ear monitor with a click track, and they have the synth pads going with it, so it's become part of our culture. Even in churches, I'm at Father's house, and we know that they also broadcast live, and they work with tracks. Sometimes they have 4 or 5 people on stage, but it sounds full. You don't need necessarily like to have one saxophonist just for one song in that, so you can incorporate things. But that is a completely new topic also. You think of what AI and all these things are, but maybe we'll keep it for next time. But thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Diana.
Wow, what a wealth of information. I really enjoyed that. And this is unfortunately not a question, but we were talking earlier and I spoke to Robert, and in the student auditions, just this cycle, we're adding commercial music. And so that's very exciting. So any students who work in this area will be able to enter the student auditions starting 2023-24. So we'll have our first finalists in these genres. It's going to be challenging because, as you said, it's an umbrella term for so many styles, but it's going to be very exciting to see. So thank you for all your work in this.
Pleasure, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
The next presentation will be in the FISMA Hall, and they're ready to start in about 5 minutes. And then afterwards, we will return back to the Yanash. Thanks, everybody.